everyone, and welcome back to BVM Sports Chalk Talk. I'm Lucas Semb, here today alongside Scott Procter and Matt Morris, and after a week off, we are back with a special episode today. We have reached the pinnacle of the NBA season, the NBA Finals, between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns, and we will focus on that matchup here today. Scott, to start things off, after catching Game 1 on Tuesday night, what are your initial reactions to the beginning of this series?
Sure thing, Luke. First off, glad to be back after a week's hiatus, man. Game 1 of these NBA Finals was a blast. Both regular season meetings between these two teams came down to the wire, and I expect, honestly, the entire series to be just as competitive. First and foremost, I have to say how genuinely surprised I was when I saw the news that Giannis Antetokounmpo would be back for Game 1. I and many others, including some on this panel, thought that the knee injury Giannis suffered in the Eastern Conference Finals would sit him down for close to a year, if not maybe longer. But credit to his toughness, to the Bucks training staff, and a little more of that Bucks luck that I mentioned a couple weeks ago, that he's back and looking relatively healthy. But with all that being said, I do like the Phoenix Suns to win these NBA Finals in 6, perhaps even 7 games. But I'd like to take you all back in time for a second. Last summer on August 8th, I published a story about this Phoenix team entitled "The Suns and Their Young Core Are a Problem." I wrote about DeAndre Ayton. I wrote about Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and obviously the budding superstar that Devin Booker is. And they go on to have the second best record in the NBA this season. During the Suns' first round playoff series against the Lakers, I tweeted during Game 2 that these were the two best teams in the Western Conference. They go on to beat LeBron James and the Lakers. They go on to beat the MVP Nikola Jokic, the Denver Nuggets, before obviously, knocking off the Paul George-led Clippers. And now here they are, matched up with a team whose best player is clearly not 100% as good as he looked health-wise in Game 1, while the rest of that Bucks roster has 0 NBA Finals experience. Giannis averaged 40 points per game on 60% shooting in the 2 meetings in the regular season versus Phoenix. And the Suns still won both of those games, albeit, in kind of nail-biting fashion. And it's largely because of what I said a couple weeks ago on this show, that Chris Paul and Devin Booker provide the Suns with 2 options down the stretch in late game situations where they could either score for their own, get their own shot, or create for one of those other viable scoring options. Possession after possession in that third quarter when the game broke open, and obviously late in the fourth, those 2 shined. They got their bucket, they got their shot off on whoever was guarding them on a switch. That's part of the reason why, these Suns will be your 2021 NBA champions, in my opinion. And that's what it's looking like. Luke, Matt, actually, I want to hear from Matt first. Matt, talk to me, Matt. What did you see after Game 1?
Well, it was exciting. It's just a great finals. I think, to your point, it's going to be close throughout. There's always going to be great games. The one thing I will say is to bring up the Bucks' lack of NBA Finals experience is kind of a moot point, considering that the only person in that entire arena last night that had any finals experience was in the bubble, and it was Jay Crowder. So, both teams.
I wouldn't say it's a moot point. Only reason I really brought it up, but I do get your point. I take that. Obviously, there's not any really much foul experience in this final series. But again, Jay Crowder was just in the last season. He played 6 games, and Chris Paul is the most seasoned, savvy veteran in this series. So if there's an experience,
but then I'll bring up that Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Giannis, Dante, even though he's hurt, Budenholzer, those guys have been in the playoffs the last 3 years, 2 Eastern Conference Finals. There's just as much playoff experience on the Bucks as there is on the Suns. In fact,
there's not.
Yeah, there is.
No, there's not.
How is there not?
Like I just said, Chris Paul is a 16-year NBA veteran who's had multiple long playoff runs. You just can't say that for Chris Middleton and the guys that you just mentioned. You just mentioned Dante DiVincenzo. What are you talking about, man? But go ahead, man. Continue.
They've been in the playoffs. Like, overall, this entire Bucks team has playoff experience.
Are you going to argue any of those guys on the Bucks roster has more NBA savvy, veteran presence than Chris Paul? Are you going to sit up here and say that?
I'm not arguing that. I'm simply saying that we're getting off topic here.
Absolutely.
Because you said that there's only no finals experience on the Bucks. It's on both sides. This is 2 new teams. That's why it's exciting. If I'm the Bucks, I'm excited. I'm still feeling good, and I would feel the same way for the Suns. Game 1 is always just kind of test the waters, see where it's at. Especially for the Bucks, they tend to, underperform to what their talent level is. When you throw into that, this was Giannis's first game after, a horrific, terrifyingly bad-looking injury. and he missed the last 2 games. Giannis is a rhythm guy. He was on a roll. I expect that as he plays more, he'll become more accustomed. And the fact that you can look at what he did last night and say that 20 points and 17 rebounds is an off night for him bodes well for the Bucks moving forward. The biggest issues were really that, similar to what has been going on throughout these playoffs, the Bucks have found themselves in a situation where they're just demanding and stubbornness of switching on every pick and roll is starting to hurt them once again. Trae Young and the Hawks kind of had some success with it. Kevin Durant had success with it in the series before with Brooklyn. And last night you saw that take over once again, where Chris Paul and Devin Booker, whether it was on Brook Lopez or Bobby Portis, even Giannis a few times, really just had their way. They got into a rhythm. They shot the ball well. And will they always make those shots? No, but they're good enough to where they're going to make them enough that you have to adjust. What boded well and what I was excited about was Budenholzer actually made a change. He went small ball. He had Giannis at the 5. He brought in Bryn Forbes and Pat Connaughton. It stopped the bleeding. It allowed the Bucks to make somewhat of a recovery and almost get back into the game, cutting the lead down to 7 at one point. But by then, with home court advantage and the momentum that the Suns had, I think it was just too little too late. And so that was really what happened with the Bucks. But a lot of positives moving forward. Drew Holiday definitely has to step up as far as his scoring. He was great in other aspects, distributing the ball and playing defense, but he has to be a little bit more aggressive. And Budenholzer and Drew both admitted to that, and they're going to draw up plays to get him more into the games. But if I'm the Bucks, I'm pretty happy with the game 1, and I'm excited to see what they do to bounce back in game 2 and try and tie this series up.
Right, Matt. The Suns played as good as they possibly could have, on Tuesday night in that game. And the Bucks in the fourth quarter gave them a run and cut it to single digits. So you got to be feeling good if you're a Bucks fan. But in my opinion, the only way game 1 would have mattered for the Bucks is if they stole a win. Losing, it just simply doesn't matter in game 1 for them. The Bucks have shown this postseason that game 1s make no difference. They play their game, then they watch the film. They make their adjustments, to my surprise, quality adjustments. They are now 1-3 in game 1s this postseason, and actually they have lost 5 of 6 game 1s going back 2 postseasons. So, they were down 0-2 to Brooklyn, the best team they've played this postseason, and they gutted out the series win. People overreact so much on social media, and it's hard to open Twitter after an NBA game at this point. There's a reason it's a 7-game series. My initial reaction is that the Bucks need to make adjustments defensively. It's the same thing as the Hawks series. Giannis needs to play the 5. Playing a switch defense with Brook Lopez won't work, and playing a drop defense with Brook Lopez won't work, because that mid-range shot is one of CP3 and Devin Booker's favorite shots. They need interchangeable defensive pieces. That would more so be the case if Giannis is at the 5. Offensively, the Suns played about as good as they could. Prime performances from Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and even Ayton with 22 and 19. The Suns played their A game. The Bucks played their C game. One will get better, and the other simply can't get that much better. So I expect this to, become a 1-1 series after the next game. And we'll talk about that a little later. But I think they'll trade blows throughout the whole series here. What do you got, Scott?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. You mentioned twice, I think, during your little soliloquy that the Suns played at their best, that they couldn't play better than they did in game 1. And I kind of wholeheartedly reject that idea. I don't think the Suns played up to their even highest level. Listen, Devin Booker was 1 of 8 from 3. Jay Crowder was 0 of 8 from the field. Mikal Bridges didn't shoot the ball.
That has been the norm for Jay Crowder all postseason. He's been atrocious from the field. Mikal Bridges, I think he had a 20-point game. He still put the ball in the hoop. Devin Booker was 1 of 8 from 3. But when he starts making those shots, when Booker starts making those shots, someone else will miss those shots. It was just a trade-off. Someone else was knocking him down last night. Cam Johnson had a huge game for the Suns. They played about as complete of a game as they could possibly play. Now, not every game are all their players going to shoot 50% from 3. Devin Booker had a bad night from 3, but it was picked up by the rest of his teammates. Now, when Devin Booker starts making those threes, I don't expect his teammates to play at that high of a level. They played a complete game as good as they possibly could have played.
And again, I kind of disagree with that. I don't expect Devin Booker to shoot as poorly as he did, and to assume that if he plays better, that other players on the team are going to play worse is kind of ridiculous. Jay Crowder
I think the assumption, though, Scott, is that If Devin Booker is hitting his shots, or Chris Paul is hitting his shots like they were last night, they're not acting as distributors and passing the ball and getting those guys open shots. When you have guys like Devin Booker and Chris Paul who have been great as distributors, DeAndre Ayton's success is mostly because of that. Credit to DeAndre Ayton, but they have really made an emphasis to get him the ball in really, successful positions. If they are stepping up in that sense and hitting those shots, then either Milwaukee is giving it to them so that they can stop everyone else from scoring. It's like, fine, we'll let Devin Booker and Chris Paul beat us. We're not going to let Cam Johnson or Mikal Bridges beat us. Or they're switching off, and it's going to be more of those side guys stepping up. But I agree with Luke in that sense. You're never going to have it all or nothing. And for that matter, then let's say that, Bobby Portis didn't score like he usually has. PJ Tucker didn't have a night that he normally does.
What? What did PJ Tucker do last night that he normally does?
Matt, I get your point. It's the ultimate team game. If Booker's making shots, those secondary guys aren't going to be making as many. That's why it's a team game. That's why you got 5 guys on the court. That's why you got subs. So I think they played as complete a game as they could. And I have to sound off on one more thing. James Harden, no respect for his game. He's a flopper. Trae Young, no respect for his game whatsoever. He's a flopper. And both of those guys have been eliminated. Devin Booker, you're next. And CP3, you're dirty. I'm getting so sick of watching.
Don't make that face, Scott.
I've been so sick of Matt, just let me finish.
Yeah,
I've been so sick of watching this type of basketball throughout the NBA all season long. Guys who just simply, to me, will be useless next year when they can't draw fouls. Like Trae Young, the only way he scores is throwing his head back. The same thing with James Harden. He is a terrible, terrible volume shooter. And when he can't draw fouls, he's just going to be useless, quite literally useless. I think Devin Booker's better than them, but to throw their head back and get fouls, the whistle last night, another thing, it was 20 free throws to about 6. That's just not going to hold up. I think the refs will, analyze what they did last night and figure things out. But it's not an excuse, but I just can't handle the flopping, and it's so sad to watch. And such a beautiful game. It quite literally ruins it.
I won't go to the extent as far as Trae Young or James Harden, but the 26 free throws for the Suns to the 16 that the Bucks had was clearly something. And I'll say this, when Jeff Van Gundy is making a comment that, wow, they're really bodying up Milwaukee in the paint, they should be getting some of those calls. It's that egregiously obvious then.
Because he stinks.
And not only that, but listen, they were being aggressive. I thought the Suns amped up their physicality, and the Bucks did not respond well, but also they were not getting the calls that I think that the Suns were getting at home. And the whole point with the Chris Paul thing, I'll say it right now, he obviously just got Giannis Antetokounmpo's way and caused Giannis to just trip over him to draw that foul. But I'm also happy that Devin
on his left knee too.
Yeah, and I'm also glad that the refs stepped up in one sense and actually called Devin Booker for kicking his legs out to try and draw the foul. That was a good call. So hopefully the refs will respond and it'll even out a little bit. I didn't have too much issue with it, but it was definitely something that you would notice. And I would assume that it's going to flip the other way once you go to Milwaukee.
Matt, you mentioned that you're glad that the refs called the offensive foul on Devin Booker for kind of kicking his leg out on the jump shot. I agree. I think that happens too often in this league, and I think it needs to be called more. But I'm also glad, while we're on the topic, that the referees called a technical foul on, I believe it was Brook Lopez, for closing out under a shooter and causing injury to Chris Paul's ankle. Once again, which we've seen multiple times over these last postseasons. It started, the first one I remember was years ago in the Western Conference Finals with Kawhi Leonard and Zaza Pachulia. He ended his season when Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs were balling. It happened.
Okay, as we move on topics here, because we have to move on, there's a difference between, by rule, it's a flagrant, but it obviously, wasn't on purpose. There's a big difference. So don't paint them out to be that way. But let's move on. Now, we have some great performances on Tuesday night from a number of players. A lot of star power in this series. Matt, who do you see as your finals MVP?
I mean, if it's any surprise, I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone. It's going to be Giannis. I think that coming back from the knee injury, still being able to do what he did last night, dropping 20 with 17 rebounds, that unbelievable block that he had, his effectiveness is only going to improve as he continues to recover and get back into his rhythm. And so I think he'll be even more aggressive than he was last night. That was actually one of my knocks, is I didn't think he was aggressive enough. They have to get DeAndre Ayton
Especially early on, I agree.
Yeah, you have to get DeAndre Ayton into foul trouble, because Giannis and that the run that they had to get back into the game, a big part of it was because Ayton was out and Jay Crowder was playing the 5 for the Suns. So I think it'll be Giannis. I think that the Bucks will continue to improve on what they did last night, and it's going to be the Bucks winning and Giannis as the Finals MVP.
Well, Matt, if the Bucks somehow win these finals, Giannis Antetokounmpo will surely be the Finals MVP. But obviously, I don't envision that happening at this point. I don't know if Chris Paul is the best player on his team or even in this series, but history tells us that the best player in the NBA Finals doesn't always win Finals MVP. In 2014, a 22-year-old, Kawhi Leonard, averaging 14 points per game in the playoffs, won Finals MVP with the Spurs, playing alongside 2 future Hall of Famers who could have easily gotten it. Tony Parker led that playoff run in points, assists, with Tim Duncan right behind him. The next year, Andre Iguodala wins Finals MVP, averaging 8 points per game, while Steph Curry averaged damn near 30 during that playoff run. Both Kawhi and Iggy won their Finals MVP in large part due to narrative. The perception was that those two played real defense and slowed down what LeBron James was able to do on the other end, which was deemed most valuable. You know, the narrative and most value in this situation falls on Chris Paul should the Suns win an NBA Finals. A Finals MVP is the only thing missing from CP3's illustrious career. Everybody in NBA circles knows that. And people will talk about how the Suns were cellar dwellers before his arrival in Phoenix. Fair or unfair, because Devin Booker will certainly have a great case for Finals MVP when it's all over with. But Chris Paul will, in my opinion, hoist his first ever Finals MVP trophy, due in large part to his play, narrative, and the value that he brought to not only this postseason run, but the Phoenix Suns organization as a whole.
I agree with you, Scott. If the Suns win this NBA Finals, I think it'll go to Chris Paul without a doubt. But I think my answer here is pretty simple. The best player in the series, one of the best players in the league, it's got to be Giannis Antetokounmpo, the 2-time back-to-back MVP, the guy who has essentially achieved, quite literally, everything you can achieve in an individual, as an individual in the NBA, besides a title. And he'll get that this year, winning his first title at 26, before Jordan, before LeBron. There's nothing he can't do. He's truly superhuman. His leg made an obtuse angle 7 days ago, and he was a game 1 starter. He is relentless, making chase down blocks in the NBA, one of the best in NBA Finals history. He is so strong down low. On one drive last night, his upper body strength literally pushed Ayton out of the paint, and he jammed it. He's a facilitator. He's a rebounder. He's a defensive specimen. Everything good that happens to the Bucks revolves around him. It starts with him, whether that's on offense or on defense, or even on the bench, as kind of a cheerleader when he's not on the court. Everything good happens through Giannis. And when they win this series, there will be no other choice but to have him as the Finals MVP. But regardless, he's the best player in the series. Now let's move on to another interesting question. The big man matchup. It's DeAndre Ayton versus Brook Lopez. Brook can stretch it a little bit better than Ayton, but Ayton is a completely different physical player. Scott, who has the advantage down low in the series?
This is an interesting question, but a relatively easy one as well. It's also a pivotal matchup, Brook Lopez and DeAndre Ayton, for the outcome of this series. I have to start with Brook Lopez because I personally feel he's been pretty great in spots, and is certainly a main reason why the Bucks were able to close out the Eastern Conference Finals without Giannis in the lineup. His recent willingness to actually use his size and play like a big man has been a breath of fresh air. And he continues, obviously, to show the ability to stretch the floor, as you alluded to, Luke, and still block and contest shots with his size and length. But that man DeAndre Ayton different, period. I saw it last summer in the bubble, and we've seen it throughout this playoff run, as he's arguably gotten the best of Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, and whoever the Clippers decided to throw at him in the Western Conference Finals. Game 1 of the finals was DeAndre Ayton's 15 rebound double-double this postseason. Only Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Walton, and Bill Russell have more of those. He's a rebounding machine, a major lob threat with Chris Paul running the show, and he's extremely efficient. It also helps when you have the point guard putting you in good direction time after time. But what really sets these two apart, and Luke, I also believe you already kind of alluded to it because I think you know the answer, it's versatility. Brook was taken advantage of multiple times on switches in game one where he was forced to defend Chris Paul, Devin Booker in isolation, and needless to say, that ain't go well. The Bucks may realize at some point this series, hopefully for their sake, that they're probably better off with Brook Lopez on the bench, and that'll never be the case for DeAndre Ayton Phoenix. He can't be taken advantage of the way Brook Lopez can. And the Phoenix Suns are at the best when DeAndre Ayton is manning the middle of that floor and running the floor as well. So the answer is obviously DeAndre Ayton as well as Brook Lopez has looked in spots this postseason.
You know, Scott, I really agree with you on basically all of that. The only thing I would say as far as if they wanted to have Brook be more of the advantage is emphasize down low in the post. Because to your point, Brook is bigger than DeAndre. Brook originally was an all-star because of his post presence and being a great back to the rim center. If they were able to use that and kind of bully Ayton down low, similar to what Giannis was able to do at times last night, that's how you get an advantage in the post from Brook Lopez.
Matt, the thing is, though, Giannis is Giannis. Brook Lopez is not going to be babying anyone down low.
And DeAndre Ayton now folding for that anyhow. So.
Exactly. And at this point in his career, especially just with fit, you can't have Brook Lopez down in the paint.
No, I understand. That's why I said that. Giannis. That's why I'm saying that it is DeAndre Ayton, because there's more emphasis on the way that he plays. I'm simply pointing out that Brook, if it were to happen, that's how it would happen. DeAndre Ayton, though, is in a system that is basically set up for him to have success because he has one of the best backcourts in the NBA always looking for him. One of the biggest things I've noticed out of this playoffs is Devin Booker willing to pass up a shot that he could normally hit with consistency to give Ayton an easier, over the top pass to score a dunk. It's something that they've emphasized. They want to get Ayton going. They want him to be dominant in the paint. And so that's why he's had the success. And that's why this matchup is better set for him, because unless you can negate Chris Paul and Devin Booker, you're not going to be able to negate DeAndre Ayton because everything goes off of those two.
Right. I maybe wouldn't have said this before the postseason, but I think the Suns have the big man edge. Man for man, Brook shoots it better, but that's about it. Strength, being able to actually step out and play defense, create mismatches, that's all Ayton. And he continues to win matchups versus elite bigs, like Scott said, like AD and Jokic. So I think Brook Lopez is the least of his worries. And especially with the Bucks switch defense last night, that just gives Ayton more of a glaring edge. They had too many guards and wings defending him, and he was able to hold them off for easy entry passes over the top, easy layups, easy lobs, easy dunks. They have completely different styles, but in this matchup, Ayton is going to be way more beneficial to his team than Brook will be to the Bucks. We've seen this in back-to-back series. Brook is almost unplayable on the defensive end, unless he's scoring 33 like he did in one game against the Hawks. He really doesn't have that much value, because if you put him down low, he's clogging it up and taking away from your MVP. And if you put him outside, he will hit a couple, and you have to respect it, but it's not to the level where he needs to keep shooting like he always does. Sometimes I think the worst thing for the Bucks is when Brook hits his first three of the game, because he starts shooting himself and he starts shooting them and he starts shooting them. And it's a wasted possession. And I feel like Brook is one of those guys on the Bucks who, when the other team goes on a run, he starts to feel panicked, and the first good look he gets, it's going up. So Brook to me is almost unplayable. And quite honestly, I've been on the trade Brook train for a long time. I think he still can help a little bit in this series, making a couple threes and maybe altering some shots defensively. But other than that, Brook Lopez is really struggling, and hopefully he can get some help, because DeAndre Ayton will expose him if this remains the case. But with one game down, go ahead, Scott.
No, actually, go ahead. Yeah, you go ahead, Lou.
I want to respond a little bit to that. I think that Lopez can still be effective. You just have to put him in the right sets. You can't have Giannis or Portis out there along with him. And to your point, Luke, that success, that 33-point game that he had, was in large part because Drew Holiday was able to penetrate and give him easy lobs, similar to what Chris Paul and Booker do for Ayton. So if you if you have the right lineup in, he can be just as successful in this series.
I disagree, Matt. I need to ask, because you said in the right sets. What set do you think is the one for Brook to be out there in? Because
when the rest of that group is not Giannis or Bobby Portis, where you can have those interchangeable switches and multiple guards. If it's just similar to what the Suns do. I mean, honestly.
It doesn't matter who else is out there, though, because they will always find Brook. Have you noticed that? On Tuesday night, they always found Brook. It doesn't matter who he was guarding. He was just always there. In my opinion,
but that's going to happen no matter who it is. They always found Bobby. They always found Giannis.
Yeah, Bobby can step out and defend. I saw Bobby Portis in one possession last night surprised the hell out of me, because he was man-to-man defense on Devin Booker for maybe 10 seconds worth of the shot clock. Booker tried hezzy, right side, had to bring it back out. Went left side, had to bring it back out. In the end, he hit a ridiculous shot, like he always does. But Bobby Portis, for 10 seconds of that shot clock, made it so hard on him. He can step out and defend. Brook Lopez, one move would have been toasted. This is the change that needs to be made. I'll let you go in a second. Giannis needs to defend Chris Paul, and he needs to do it the rest of the series. This is what I think, and I think Bobby Portis is your starting four there, and he can take care of DeAndre Ayton, because the biggest thing to me is that everything runs through Chris Paul in this offense. He is truly the point guard, and he has shown this so far in game one, but all the postseason. Put some length on him, make it hard for him to do anything and get into the flow of his offense. Make them play through someone else. Make them play through Booker, and let Middleton guard him. I know Booker can run the offense too, but everything goes through Chris Paul, and it's so hard to watch. He's so savvy. He's so smart. He makes no errors. If you put some length on him, someone who can really make him struggle, that's the biggest change. Bobby will be fine on Ayton. It's not like Ayton's catching it and backing someone down. He's just good on the lob. He knows where to be, and I think Bobby can shore that up.
So this is my thing, and where I was going to jump in is I wanted you guys to tell me where this series changes. Obviously, aside from when it goes back to Milwaukee and there's a big home court advantage that the Bucks will have in Fiserv Forum. And I really want you guys to listen to each other, to this conversation between you two as two Bucks fans. Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, Giannis Antetokounmpo, one or two of those three are going to have to be on the court, period. You guys are at your best when two or three of those are on the court, excuse me. Devin Booker and Chris Paul are going to be able to find those mismatches, similar to what LeBron has done in the postseason for years. They're able to find switches and get the matchup that they want. Bobby Portis, y'all know Bobby Portis is my favorite Buck. And I agree with you, Luke. He is definitely a better perimeter defender, obviously, than Brook Lopez. And he's probably even a better perimeter defender than most guys his size. But he might force a miss from Chris Paul and Devin Booker, but that's not sustainable. And those guys are going to have to be on the court. And that is an advantage to the Phoenix Suns. And it's why they're going to win this series. And again, Luke, you mentioned earlier that the change has to be made from adjustments from the coaching staff. Do you two really trust Mike Budenholzer to make the right adjustments? I know he made the right adjustments against Brooklyn.
I haven't trusted him for years. And then all of a sudden this postseason, every move he makes has been right.
That's true.
Yes, I do trust him at this point, and I trust them to make those changes. And I think they win the series.
I guess that's what I wanted to hear.
You mentioned Bobby on that mismatch having to come out and guard. I'm fine with that. They're not going to do it every single time like they do against Brook, because Bobby can actually do it. Bobby will be in there to just break up lobs or put a body on Ayton, because you know Bobby's biggest thing is his tenacity. He's a tough, hard-nosed player.
But the thing with that, though, in that specific matchup, though, DeAndre Ayton has the size advantage. We've seen him multiple times catch, not even take a dribble, and just go straight up and go straight over somebody who's shorter like Bobby Portis. That's going to be there all game.
Okay,
and again, with Chris Paul distributing the basketball.
If you have to pick and choose, though, I'm going to let Ayton try to beat me inside over tough-nosed Bobby Portis than I am CP3 or Booker taking wide-open threes or mid-range jumpers. You have to pick and choose against a team like this because they have weapons everywhere. I think if you make Ayton beat you, the series is in your hands. If he beats you, he beats you. That's fine. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Bucks have no issue with that.
That's fine. And it makes sense to have DeAndre Ayton be the focal point and force him to be, the scorer. But we just got done talking about how valid and how good DeAndre Ayton is on both ends of the floor. So if that's what the Bucks want to go with, it sounded like I had some agreements with me. So, but
I understand where you're coming from. But to your own point, you mentioned Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, and Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton, Frank Kaminsky. Like, that's how quickly this could fall apart for the Suns. If Giannis gets aggressive, like we all agree he needs to be, if Ayton falls into foul trouble, especially with Saric going out, and we haven't heard anything on what his health is going to be like moving forward, they had Jay Crowder in at the 5. Like, that's how quickly this could fall apart. And we've had this conversation as far as the Suns imposing what they want to do on the Bucks. What happens when the Bucks are able to flip it and impose what they want to do, which is, to your point, it usually involves either 1 or 2 or even 3 of those big men out there because they're able to stretch it and control the boards.
Right. Listen, Scott, we're arguing because we want what's best for the Bucks. I'm not panicking. None of that.
No, I think it's panicking.
No, exactly. I think it's a very simple change. The Bucks survived KD's best game of his career. They survived Trae Young's best game of his career. They survived a Giannis injury. A great Chris Paul game 1 or DeAndre Ayton game 1, again, is the least of our worries. Obviously, changes need to be made, but I think we can handle it. As we wrap up here with 1 game down, let's make our game 2 predictions. Matt, who do you have taking game 2 on Thursday night?
I think the Bucks come out hot and they take game 2. I could see it being by 6 or 7, depending on if it starts to get, fouls towards the end to try and prolong the game. But the Bucks win.
I think the Phoenix Suns protect home court. I think they're too well coached. I think they understand what's at stake because I think they know the type of environment they're going to be heading back to in Game 3 in Milwaukee in the Fiserv Forum. Honestly, I'll add this as well. Phoenix Suns go up 2-0. I still don't think this is over with from the Bucks' perspective. They've been down 0-2 in these playoffs before. And again, is Giannis Antetokounmpo, as long as he continues to stay healthy, you would think he's going to continue to, get better and get his feet more under him as the series goes on. So, again, I like the Phoenix Suns to protect home court, win game 2. But again, I expect this to go 6-7 games.
Right, I'm on the same track as you, Scott, except I got the Bucks winning this next one. With their adjustments made and a more comfortable and aggressive Giannis, there's no way he'll shoot the 4th most shots again if they want to win. The Bucks will be able to go to Milwaukee, knotted up 1-1, but I do think the series goes 7. I think they'll trade blows all the way throughout. We're definitely in for a good one. Their 2 regular season games were separated by 2 points. So I definitely expect this to be an incredible series, but that's all the time we have here today on Chalk Talk. From myself, Scott Procter, and Matt Morris, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the NBA Finals, and we'll be here next time to discuss it more. Have a great week.